Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for coming. This is study week, and so lead library gets a little on the panicky side. So if you notice students who seem distracted as you found your parking space, or that's the reason. So this is study week, and then next week is finals, and it's always fun to, maybe because most of us have finished school, it's always kind of fun to watch the students as they get ready for a critical time in the semester. My name is Maggie Farrell. I am Dean of the Libraries, and I'd like to welcome you to the Lance and Elena Calvert Undergraduate Research Awards. Today, we honor student researchers, knowing that the skills acquired as an undergraduate will strengthen academic and personal success. Regardless if a student goes on to graduate studies, the critical thinking skills and ability to apply information will strengthen an individual. We can see that clearly today in the era of fake news. And so these students are applying those research skills within their own studies, but it also applies to lifelong learning skills. We often consider research at the faculty and graduate student level, but unique to UNLV, we work with students to create research capabilities in our undergraduate programs. Today, we celebrate our students through these unique awards across disciplines and programs throughout the university. This program is made possible through the generosity of Elena and Lance Calvert. Elena and Lance have joined us this afternoon. Would you please stand so that we can recognize your generosity? Elena and Lance, we thank you for your commitment to student success. Also joining us this afternoon, Dr. Chris Heavey. Dr. Heavey is the Senior Vice Provost, and he is a professor of psychology and a licensed psychologist. Thank you, Chris, for joining us from the Provost's office. We have also a number of our library's advisory board members. Today we have Flora Mason. Flora is right here. Thank you, Flora. Sitting next to Flora is Betty Lacombe. Betty, thank you for joining us. The library's advisory board helps us in our fundraising and advocacy for the libraries, and they are tremendous partners in connecting us with the community and supporting a number of initiatives that we have within the libraries. I also would like to recognize two of my colleagues. So as a dean, I get to work with deans across the university, and it's a terrific group. Dr. Ron Brown is here. He's Dean of the College of Allied Health. Hi, Ron. And in the back is another great partner, Dr. Andrew Hansen, who is Dean of the Honors College. Thank you, Andrew. Again, thank you all for coming this afternoon for the presentation of awards. Please join me in welcoming Kate Wintrall. Kate is a teaching and learning librarian who has chaired our Calvert Undergraduate Research Award Committee this year. Welcome, Kate.
All right, good evening. Good evening. I'm honored to have the opportunity to announce the recipients of the 2009 Lance and Elena Undergraduate Research Awards. We'll begin with our award for the Emerging Scholar, and that's going to be presented to junior Ariel Armstrong for her research paper, Youth Culture in Great Britain, The Effect on the Rapidly Growing Universities, 1963 to 1968, completed for History 451, the capstone seminar. Dr. Michelle Toussaint, Ariel's faculty sponsor, applauded her keen ability to track down source material and use the library to facilitate research. By constantly building on her research base and analyzing the sometimes difficult to understand material, Dr. Toussaint said, Ariel produced an engaging and important study of a thus so far little studied topic. Ariel is going to come up now and talk about her research.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you for the introduction. It's an honor to be here, and I'm excited to speak a little bit about my project. I'll get right into it. First, I'll talk about what brought me to the topic that I decided to research. The concept for my project came to fruition through my interest in youth culture and activism. During my 251 course, also with Dr. Toussaint, I decided to focus on youth movements in 1968 in European countries. I was studying revolutionary movements by student and youth activists. I knew I wanted to continue on the course of youth activism for my 451 capstone course, but wasn't sure what direction to take. I learned in class that in many cases through history, while other places revolted, Britain usually made reforms instead. So I knew I wanted to take on something less along the lines of revolution and more along the lines of change and improved circumstances for young people and students. I discussed with my professor, Dr. Toussaint, where I could possibly take my research while staying on the course of youth activism, movements, and change. She recommended to me Hope and Glory in Britain, 1900 to 1990, a book by Peter Clark. While going through the book, I saw the mention of the Robbins Report and that it was related to the growth of education during the period of peak student activism. Once I looked into the report, I decided to take the idea that youth activism and movements were of a political nature from my 251 project and incorporate the concept to further study that this report impacted youth and pop cultures and that those cultures were inherently political in this age of post-materialism. The research project I submitted for this award, titled Youth Culture in Great Britain, The Effects of the Rapidly Growing Universities, 1963 to 1968, discusses the growth of higher education in Britain during the long 60s as impacted by the Robbins Report, a parliamentary document that summarized higher education in Great Britain and made recommendations to expand higher education to include wider access, a broader education, more detailed teacher training, and new university planning. I split my project into 4 sections to thoroughly address the concept I was aiming towards. Those sections were first, the Robbins Report, which explained the document in full. Second was the new university, Women and Curriculum, which explained how the report in question affected women in these new universities and the change of curriculum brought to these universities. Third was introducing the youth, pop, and counterculture, which explained how the curriculum, mixing men and women and all people, helped youth adapt to these cultures for expression. And finally, the youth politicized, which explained the involvement of British youth in politics and how it related to the growth of education and the youth cultures. In my essay, I argued that the growth of higher education in Great Britain during the 60s, specifically 63 to 68, was greatly impacted by the Robbins Report. It, or the changes enacted in its wake, created opportunity for students of new universities, which did include women, by the broadening of more liberal studies. Through this, the ability of these peoples to express pop and counter and youth cultures expanded, creating a politicization within these youth cultures. The impact of this report was so impressive, though, because of the incredibly rapid rate at which new opportunity in higher education came because of the report. The process in which I went through to research the subject was extensive, but nonetheless interesting. Through the lead library, I was able to access many journals and archives that were most crucial in assisting my research. I started by researching simply just the Robbins Report and found the document in the Parliamentary Command Paper Archive, which, with further research, led me to Historic Hansard Archives, which holds records of parliamentary meetings and discussions and topics, which in this case for me was the education situation. I sorted the topic by dates and used different keywords like the Robbins Report or education and found a handful of records on the topic. I moved on to a general search through the Lead Library website to start narrowing down journal articles and other sources which I was able to process and sort through beautifully on the library's website, which made it simple and easy to keep track of what I was doing. The general search I was able to make with various keywords was a significant part of my research because I found valuable sources that I would not have found via the search engine through the library. Finally, I made use of the many stacks in the library and went to the section that had various books on the 60s and the changing time and politics, which led me to check out way more books than I could actually carry. Each of these sources that I found through the aid of what is provided by UNLV were indispensable to my research. What I learned through this research is that the process in creating a project this size is incredibly difficult, but it is worth every moment of work. I not only honed my skills in research, but in writing as well. It also felt great to get through the semester of work and finally see a successful finished project on a subject that I thoroughly enjoyed learning more about. However, I did not only learn about the research process. Through research and writing my paper, I discovered that while sources did connect politics, youth, and culture and the growth of higher education, they did not necessarily correlate all of them together and rather only connected 1 or 2 points. For example, only politics to education or only education to culture. My research, however, created a connection between all three of these points. It was important to try to make a connection, though, because all of these points are still relevant today in terms of how important education is for cultural and political growth. Part of the interest I have in youth activism is the movements and activism that we have been able to witness in young people during the current political and social climate. I believe that institutions of higher education help involve students to develop with these cultures and with the politics. In the end, it was rewarding to see the final product that I constructed through my research. In closing, I would like to thank those who contributed to my success with this project. Dr. Toussaint, thank you for your guidance during the research and writing process, and thank you for making yourself available to answer all of my many, many, many questions. Your help was invaluable in deciding the topic that I did and in helping me find my writing style. To my family, thank you for helping me when I was stuck and for always accepting to review my work and for listening to me repeatedly tell you with excitement what my paper was about. And finally, thank you, Lance and Elena Calvert, for endowing this award and for helping students have a chance to further share their research. Thank you again and enjoy the rest of the ceremony. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ariel. All right, our next award is for the creative works. And it's we have Carson Wilson, who's an honors college senior majoring in theater arts, stage and screen with a minor in Spanish and psychology, wrote an original play called Identity Podcast, an original play for the honors college thesis course. Faculty sponsor, Dr. Leslie Cross, praised Carson's scrupulous attention to the historical, cultural, social, political, emotional, theatrical, and theoretical dimensions of this undertaking. Dr. Cross said, Carson's work is a shining example of a truly interdisciplinary project undertaken with unfailing emotional and academic intelligence. Carson, are you here? All right. Carson is going to describe. Carson will now describe this original work of interactive verbatim theater, right? There you go.
Hello, everyone. My name is Carson. I use they, them, theirs pronouns. Nice to meet all of you. So my overall goal for my play was to provide representation for queer and transgender students of color. And I didn't know where to begin. And so I had made an appointment with Kate Wintrall and we went over, I was like, I want to make this very specific to UNLV. And so, because I think it's, what to me is more revolutionary about theater that film and movies can't give us, is that you can make it very specific to the environment that you are in. And so this is a play about UNLV students and their experiences living on campus with their identities. So I like to say that my play is like pseudo-qualitative research and then a little bit of creative work and then activist theater. So it's a little bit of all of that jumbled into one. So I was going through the library and reading at least, it was 10 books, and I was just pooling over them, and I found a book called Verbatim Theater, and I was going through what other people had done. Verbatim theater is also known as documentary theater, and it's when you take the word-for-word interviews and you incorporate those into the play. And so this was really inspiring for me, and so I thought that's something that I would like to do for the play, because I thought that because my goal is for representation, who would not be a better voice for that than the people themselves? And so I decided that I would interview some people who lived, who are here on campus. And so I reached out to Spectrum and I went to Queer and Transgender Forum for students of color. And I asked them if they were interested in having their voices represented in a theatrical production, and I got 3 people who were interested, and I went through those interview processes, transcribed all those interviews, and then edited and stylized them, and that became the play. And we went over, the way that I interviewed them about their different identities, more than just being queer and being transgender and being a person of color, but also about their religion and their ability and all the facets that make them a whole human being, because I think one of the biggest issues that we find in representation is that there's a very narrow track of who a person is. And so my big goal was to show that nuance and show that humanity by asking all of these questions, and so that we see that you can be a person with all these identities at once. In fact, one of my favorite quotes from the play is that you can see yourself, parts of yourself everywhere, but not a whole version of you. And that's kind of something that rang true to me when I was doing the play. So there's the verbatim aspect of the play. And then there's this interactive element that comes from Theater of the Oppressed. I did a research paper on Augusta Boal, like by random in my theater history class with Dr. Cross, and I fell in love with everything that he did and all of the Theater of the Oppressed work. And I was just so befuddled, I guess, as to why I hadn't seen that kind of work here in Vegas. And so I really wanted to incorporate that in my work. And so what Theater of the Oppressed does is transform the audience from passive participants into active participants of a performance. So they are not merely watching a performance, they are actively engaging in the ideas that are being presented. And so during the play, I ask the audience questions. I go out of where I am on stage and I talk to them and I ask them something about the play, some of the ideas. And then I go back and they are faced on the spotlight to answer the questions that I ask them. And that just encourages that critical thinking atmosphere. And then the podcast element comes from just something that one of the people that I interviewed said. They were like, this feels like a podcast. And I took it as a joke, but then I was like, that would be an interesting way to do things. And so the style of it is that these three people are talking about their identities in a podcast. UNLV's only only podcast with an interactive studio audience. And they talk about their identities. And so during the stage reading, which happened 2 weekends ago, I actually filmed the performance as if it were a podcast, because sometimes podcasts can happen on Facebook Live. And so I incorporated that element of it. So because something that was really important to me was recognizing that this is more than just a play. This is also real life. These are real people's words and real people's stories. And so I wanted to make sure that everybody, by the end of that, they understood that concept. So that is my play. And so I would just really like to say my thanks to Kate Wintrall and Priscilla Finley for helping me get started with that research process. And I would like to thank everyone on my committee, Dr. Cross, Dr. Anita Tejeda Revilla, and Professor Costello for their support. I would like to thank everyone on my cast and crew for my stage reading, as well as Second Stage for sponsoring that event. And a huge thanks to the three people I interviewed, Minam, Nat, and Nia, who agreed to share their stories with the world and trusted me to maintain their truth with moral integrity. And of course, a very special thank you to Lance and Elena Calvert for this award.
All right, thank you. Now we're going to do the next three awards are for advanced research. And our first winner is James Marmaduke, and he is a senior with a double major in criminal justice and philosophy. He's honored for his research paper, The Influence of the Warren Court and Natural Rights on Substantive Process. It was completed as an independent study in criminal justice under Dr. Harku Hangawada, right? Dr. Hangawada remarked that James's work on abstract concept of due process and its application involved legal research dating back centuries, plus comprehension and analysis of highly abstract doctrinal and theoretical material. As Dr. Karu commented, James is very intelligent, determined, and hardworking student who is easily among the top 2 undergraduates I have ever had at UNLV. James is going to tell us now a little bit about his fascinating research.
Okay, so as Ms. Wintrell said, the title of my project was The Influence of the Warren Court and Natural Rights on Substantive Due Process. So just to break that down for a minute and explain what that means. There's a distinction here between substantive due process and procedural due process. These are derived from the 5th and 14th Amendments to the United States Constitution. Each of those has a due process clause. The 5th Amendment applied only to the federal government. The 14th Amendment took that same concept and applied it to the states. The general thrust of due process is that it says that, given either the federal government or a state, cannot deprive you of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. In other words, you cannot be fined, imprisoned, or executed unless you have been given legal processes. That is generally what is considered procedural due process, derived from the text of the amendments. Substantive due process goes beyond that. What substantive due process is additional guarantees beyond the text, typically in its old form of economic or property-based rights, and in its modern iteration, typically individual rights that are unenumerated in the actual text of the Constitution. The rights that have been found from substantive due process typically involve the really hot-button issues that the Supreme Court hears. So the cases involving the right to have a gun in the home for self-defense, the right to abortion, the right to gay marriage, various other LGBTQ rights, rights to contraception between married couples, all of these are derived from substantive due process. So it's interesting because most people don't really understand this concept. They think a lot of these rights often come from the legislature, when in fact most people, probably on UNLV, a lot of people in this country have been affected by substantive due process to some degree, even if they don't realize it. Now, the Warren Court comes in because it was during the tenure of Earl Warren as Chief Justice of the Supreme Court during the 1960s primarily, where substantive due process underwent this shift, and it stopped being focused so much on economic and property-based rights and transitioned into the individual rights-based approach that the courts typically take now to it. So as far as where I got the idea for this project, I doubt this comes as a surprise to many people. Given my topic, I plan to go to law school after my undergrad. I was reading a book called America's Unwritten Constitution by Akhil Amar, who is a professor at Yale Law School, and I became fascinated with this concept of unenumerated rights in the Constitution. Where do these unenumerated rights come from? Who gets to decide what we have the right to when that right isn't actually enumerated in the text? And then on top of that, once the court has decided that we have a particular right that's unenumerated, where they choose to derive that right from. As we already discussed, both the 5th and 14th Amendments have due process clauses. The 14th Amendment also contains a privileges and immunities clause that's been used to derive some rights. We also have the 9th Amendment, which is primarily concerned with unenumerated rights. And I was really interested in why the courts over and over and over choose the 14th Amendment to be the vehicle to isolate those unenumerated rights. So as far as what I think the significance of this type of work is, I think this is something that a lot of people, citizens in particular, need to take seriously, because there's been a loss of faith overall in the legislature and in Congress to pass legislation concerning a lot of these ideas. So people have begun to rely on the courts to protect these sorts of rights, these unenumerated rights. As we've seen since President Trump was elected, Supreme Court nominations have become particularly contentious because these rights are being protected under substantive due process, which gives courts jurisdiction to hear these types of cases. So by completing this project, I learned a tremendous amount about researching. I learned a tremendous amount about how to write very long papers. One of the primary things that I learned about that I realized after I completed it that I was woefully underprepared for was really getting down to the nitty-gritty of primary versus secondary sources. Over and over, I would cite secondary sources in my paper, thinking that it was fine. I got the information that I needed. I knew that the secondary source was accurate and legitimate, but my mentor, Professor Hungawate, kept pushing me to know toss that aside, find the primary source, find the actual writings by people writing in the 1800s, 1700s, even 1600s to some degree, find their actual words, quote those, use those as your reference. So there are many, many people who contributed to my work on this paper and contributed to my success, but the couple that I will try to thank here is, again, Dr. Hangawate. He was incredibly helpful during the entire process, and this has been long. I've been working on this paper for a little bit over a year. He was always more than willing whenever I would come to his office to sit and talk with me, exchange ideas, banter ideas back and forth. Long past his office hours concluded, he was always there to hear me out with whatever I wanted to go over. Miss Susie Scarl, the criminal justice librarian, was incredibly helpful. I was not very well versed, unfortunately, in how to use a lot of the tools that the library had to offer before I began this project. She absolutely steered me in the right direction. She showed me a lot of the things I was doing wrong. I learned how to properly use interlibrary loans. She gave me a lot of ideas for how to look past the library and what things they have physically here. She suggested that I could actually go to the law library at Boyd Law School. They have a terminal there where you can use Westlaw, which is a search engine for legal research. That was incredibly useful in terms of tracking down individual citations for very old cases. I would like to thank my mother. She was incredibly helpful. I talked about this paper to her way more than I should have. She now knows more about substantive due process than she ever thought she would or ever would have wanted to know. Obviously, I would like to thank Lance and Elena Calvert for sponsoring this award. It's incredible to give undergraduate students such an opportunity to pursue research like this, to be able to have the opportunity to dig so deeply into an idea, and for students like myself to give us even a small taste of what it's going to be like to do postgraduate research and publications. So thank you so much.
All right, our next recipient is E. Mint, and she is a senior in the Honors College, majoring in economics and math with a minor in psychology. Her research paper is titled Predictors of Adolescent Interest in STEM Majors and Careers. It was completed for the Honors College thesis course. Dr. Rachel Robinette, East faculty sponsor, praised her motivation and resourcefulness as well as the practical implications of her research. She identified several malleable attributes that are closely associated with adolescents' interest in STEM majors. In the future, educators can work towards fostering these attributes in a wider breadth of students. So now, he is going to describe her research paper for us.
Good evening. Thank you all for being here. First off, I'd like to thank Lance and Elena Calvert for your generous support. It's truly an honor to be here tonight. I would also like to thank my thesis advisor, Dr. Rachel Robnett, who is also here tonight, for her continuous support from day one. When I decided that I wanted to take on this project, which studies gender and math and science achievement among adolescents, it was really hard for me to come up with a unique research study idea that has not been done in this area, because I just felt that it was a pretty hot topic and there were tons of research findings in the field. However, under Dr. Robnett's mentorship, I was eventually able to narrow the scope down to a few most important ones and went from there. I would have been totally lost just thinking about the hypothesis if it wasn't for her. Rachel, I also thank you for our numerous conversations on the project, for always answering my questions with great patience, and most of all for optimism and insightful suggestions. I'm very grateful to have found you as my mentor. So to describe a little bit about my project, my thesis is based on Eccles' expectancy value theory. So amongst the predictors of grades, gender bias, and self-expectancies and values, my thesis examines how powerful each predictor is relative to the others in predicting adolescents' interest in STEM majors and careers. So when I first took on the project, I was reading the AAUW reports, which are meta-analyses of all the findings in the field, which was awesome because they gave me the ideas of what has not been done in the field. So from these reports, I searched the articles by mainly utilizing PsycInfo from UNLV Libraries database. PsycInfo database was really invaluable because it gave me access not only to the academic journal articles, but also to books as well as published and unpublished doctoral dissertations, which all later became very important resources in my project. So UNLV Libraries resources not only assist me in accomplishing my thesis, but also ensure that my research process was smooth. Before taking on this project, I was only familiar with citing journal articles in APA style. However, through my attendance at the library's research workshops and my access to APA publication manual on the library's website, I have learned how to properly format in-text citations as well as a reference page for different sources such as book chapters as well as dissertations. Another thing I have quickly learned is that the utilization of statistical software is a necessity in conducting research in social sciences. And I'm thankful that UNLV provides access to software such as SPSS and Stata, which make research inexpensive and allow me to work on the project at any time during the library hours. So the number of things that I've learned over the past year while working on my thesis is countless. I remember being in Honors 498 class, and when Dr. Henson asked what was the first thing we should be looking at when finding the articles, and we all gave some good answers such as abstract, introduction, findings, and conclusion, but no one said to look at the title first. That was quite shocking because I didn't realize that either. So I might have been doing that unconsciously, I don't know. But since then, I have learned to read the title first, then only if the title seems relevant, I read the abstract. By doing so, I not only collected a sufficient amount of journal articles that I needed, but it was also very time efficient. So as an economics student, I'm always thinking about efficiency in everything I do. I've also learned that being open-minded is the key because there will be times where your data or research findings may surprise you. And most importantly, I have learned to be persistent and enjoy the process of learning. It's always good to aim for the final product of your work, but because research can be a very long process, I think it's also really important to enjoy the research process as well. Thank you all for listening.
All right, now, you know, we all know that UNLV students are multi-talented. For example, our last recipient is Cassidy Whetstone. However, she is unable to attend because she is representing Las Vegas right now as we speak in the Curling Arena National Championships in Pennsylvania. Cassidy is a senior majoring in history. She won for her paper a series of political Russian events to exploit and destroy the Volga Germans 1914 to 1921. It was completed for History 451, the capstone seminar. Dr. Michelle Toussaint, Cassidy's faculty sponsor, commented that her work is nuanced and thoroughly researched, timely and important. In addition, Dr. Toussaint said, the range and quality of research in Cassidy's paper is what we want our undergraduate students to produce at UNLV, and this project embodies the goals of a top-tier university. Now, Cassidy's mother, Deborah Whetstone, will read her daughter's remarks. Ready? Deborah.
Good evening. All right. I would like to start off by saying how incredibly honored I am to be a recipient of this undergraduate research award. I am sorry that I cannot be with you this evening, but I am in Philadelphia representing Las Vegas in the United States America Curling Arena National Championships. I am beyond thrilled that my project was selected for this prestigious award, as I believe it is an important story that needs to be told. Growing up, my grandmother would tell stories of her parents who were from Germany but had moved to Russia to assist in farming. She did not know much about their experiences in Russia, though, only that there were times where her parents felt that they were being targeted as an enemy within. This continued to fascinate me, and I wanted to learn more about what had happened. So when I started History 251, I decided to use university resources to see what I could find out about the Volga Germans. I initially studied the origins of the Volga Germans and analyzed the policy failures on behalf of the Catherine II administration. By doing this, I discovered that the Volga Germans were exploited and discriminated against for the entire time that they were in Russia, from the 1760s to the mid-1900s. The breaking point of this exploitation I narrowed down to be from 1914 to 1921. When I got to History 451, I decided that I would continue researching the Volga Germans and emphasize the events that took place in 1914 with World War I, 1917 with the Russian Revolution, and 1921 with the Russian famine. I searched the library book stacks and discovered a handful of books with background information regarding each respective event. Based on my understandings of these events, I believe that the combination of these major events in a short 7-year time period were catastrophic for the Volga Germans. I searched through various online databases as well as interlibrary loan and found materials focused directly on the Volga German experience during this time. One of the most precious letters that I discovered was written by a Volga German to her sister in the United States, and she wrote that she was so terrified in Russia that she wasn't sure she nor her family would make it out alive. It was for the experiences of that woman, my own great-grandparents, and so many others that I wanted to tell this story, which really has not been told. This project would not have been possible without some instrumental library resources, as well as university staff who guided me along the way. As for library resources, interlibrary loan and the microfilm collection were really what built my project. I obtained some incredible firsthand accounts via these methods. So I would like to recognize those resources and thank the Lead Library for making them available to me. Next, I would like to thank some instrumental people. First and foremost, I would like to thank Dr. Tucson for not only believing in this project, but for giving this story an opportunity to be told. If it weren't for your guidance in both History 251 and 451, this project wouldn't be what it is today. I would also like to thank Dr. Paul Worth for assisting me with locating Russian history resources to study how the Volga Germans were treated. I would like to thank Lance and Elena Calvert personally for sponsoring this award. It truly means so much to me that I am able to tell this story and have it be recognized at such a prestigious level. Finally, I would like to thank my grandparents, my grandmother for giving me this story, and my grandfather for always listening to me ramble after I found exciting evidence for this project. You truly have no idea how much your support on this has meant to me, and I can only hope that this project brought insight to our family history. This project was incredibly challenging for me, as there are many obstacles when researching this tale of what some have classified as genocide. I reached out to authors of books and other scholars to never receive their response. I searched through an Oregon-based research center for the Volga Germans, where they also acknowledged the difficulty in conducting research. However, I used those obstacles as arguing points in my project to advocate for the preservation of primary materials, as well as accessibility to researchers. Overall, I must admit that I am incredibly proud of this project and feel that the frustrations that came with the intense research have all paid off. To have this story come together with the resources that I was able to use is more than I could have asked for with this project. Thank you again to Lance and Elena Calvert, the Lead Library, Dr. Tucson, and everyone that I consulted with who have supported this endeavor. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. Could we have all the winners right up here to get your certificates? Isn't it inspiring to hear from our students? I just love it. My name is Melissa Bowles-Terry. I'm the head of educational initiatives at the libraries, and I get to close out the event tonight. This is one of my favorite events of the year because it is such a celebration of student achievement, which is what we are all here to support at the university. And it's also an opportunity to acknowledge that it takes all of us to support and enhance undergraduate research. It's really a team effort. And I have several people that I want to thank who make this award program possible. I'm so pleased that we're able to recognize the work of our excellent students, as well as their faculty mentors, who you heard them all speak about, who make such a difference to them. And this is thanks to the generosity and vision, of course, of Lance and Elena Calvert. I have a couple of stories to tell you. Since the Calverts endowed this program in 2006, we've recognized the work of 45 student researchers, plus 5 more tonight, which brings us to 50. And as you heard from our winners tonight, these awards are really meaningful to students, and they make a difference to their future plans. So one of our past winners is named Tyler Perry, and he got the award in 2009, 10 years ago. He won for a paper titled The Paradox of Progress, Hildegard in the Age of Transition. And after he graduated from UNLV, he went on to get a PhD in history from the University of South Carolina, and he became a professor of African American Studies at CSU Fullerton. And this fall, he's returning to UNLV as a professor in African American Studies and African Diaspora Studies, coming full circle back home. I just think that is terrific. So Tyler would love to be here tonight, but he is finishing up his semester at CSU Fullerton, and he's very excited to join us next year for the Calvert Awards when he'll be here at UNLV, back at his alma mater. He told me that the Calvert Award was the first big award that he ever won. It introduced him to the rigors of scholarly research and the idea that the work that he was doing was really valuable. It was worthwhile. So I share this story with you to illustrate the amazing possibilities that lie before our student winners tonight. And this recognition is so well deserved for all of you, and you have so many exciting things yet to come. So I would also like to thank the library and university administration for their acknowledgement of the importance of undergraduate research at a university. It's a high-impact practice that makes such a big difference to student success, because as you can see, it connects students to the university. It puts them in touch with faculty mentors, with librarians, and connects them with resources that are available to them. So I really thank you for your support of this, and I really feel like we keep doing it better and better at UNLV, supporting undergraduate research. I would like to give a round of applause to the teaching faculty who work with students every day on this. Faculty mentors, would you stand up for just a moment? You deserve a big hand. Thank you. You're doing such good work to support our students. The students who apply for this award submit a letter of support from a faculty member, and that gives our judges some context for how the student is asking and answering the important questions within their field, and it gives us an idea of the significance of the work, and it's just vital to have faculty support in this process. I would also really like to give a hand to library staff. There are folks on the front lines who you may have heard mentioned who met with students to help them with their research to get them started. There are also lots of people behind the scenes who build our fantastic discovery systems and make it all possible so that students can find and use this stuff. So thank you so much to all of you on behalf of our students. You make the research possible. I have some colleagues who in particular manage the promotion application process for this award: Kate Wintroll, Roseanne Matola, and R.C. Wonderly. Thank you so much. You did a really fantastic job. And finally, to the librarians and other faculty members who volunteered as judges: Levent Atisi from the Office of Undergraduate Research, Dan Bubb and Rebecca DiVierniero from Honors, Allison Sloat from Biology, and Avery Body, Allie Cox, Kelsey George, Priscilla Gutierrez, Stormy Hendricks, Leah Howd, Laurel Lamb, Mark Lenker, Carrie Stewart, Amy Tureen, and Greg Volker from the libraries. Would you all stand if you're here? We really have to thank the judges because it is a very short turnaround time from when students submit their work, because we want to give them as long as possible to the end of the semester. So we set that deadline just as late as we can and then turn it around really quick to have this reception. And the judges do a really great job. They are very conscientious about the decision-making process, and we got a lot of great applications from all over campus. It's not an easy job, and we thank you very much for that. So I hope that you all have enjoyed yourselves tonight. I hope you'll take some time to stick around and congratulate our winners and hear some more about the long road that has brought them here. Please enjoy some refreshments, stay and chat, and thank you all so much for coming. Good night.